Today here with Roni Fouks, host of the Human Nature Show. Roni, you seem to be some sort of right-wing extremist from what I gathered from your show. For example, you believe that society needs strong men. Why do you believe that?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't say I'm extreme right wing, but I'm sure other people would label me as such. I think we need strong men because, they maintain society. They build society. Families need strong men. Women need strong husbands. Children need a strong father around. And in general, we need strong, healthy people. And what's happening with men today is that they're being discouraged from growing up or from developing themselves. And they're being discouraged from, building strength. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a different message.
Men need a strong husband. That will put you on the Wikipedia page as a conspiracy theorist. I agree. Totally agree with you. So what does that look like, though?
Yeah. So, when I say strong husband, a lot of people kind of misinterpret that and they think, it's a dominating husband or a husband who, kind of, his word is law in the house. That's not it at all. It's someone, with the spine, who's confident in who he is, someone with a work ethic, someone who's respectful of women and of his wife and wants the best for their relationship. Then when a man isn't strong, when he's, submissive or indecisive, and his wife feels like she can't rely on him, like he's not going to be there for her when things get tough, that's that's a recipe for disaster. And I think a lot of women, even if they've kind of drink the Kool-Aid of feminism, I think, deep down, they're looking for someone who's strong and who will push back on certain things, like who has his values. Because relationship, we both kind of balance each other and complement each other. And it goes both ways. But when a man is doesn't have the strength to say his piece, women will get frustrated with that, even if they don't, have the words for it.
And I sometimes wonder if women are testing the man to see, is he going to be strong enough? But the men may not realize that. So then they actually don't exhibit the strength.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a situation. And I think it's truest when the man is the least decisive, the least able to kind of say his own opinion and, stand his ground on what he believes in. I think women, especially in those situations, will test him to see, if he can step up. And that's it. It's to see, are you a man who's anchored to his values, who has self-respect, who, isn't going to kind of fall over at any, of my emotional mood swings. He can kind of ride the wave and he's still there and still solid. So there's definitely testing that goes on. And I think a lot of men misinterpret that and they try to become even more submissive and, kind of, feed into that. They think they need to be nicer and, kind of cater to their wives even more. And that's just not a healthy balance. And, again, it's not about being dominating, but it's not being a pushover. And that goes for, men and women in a relationship.
The way you describe that cycle, you could be a psychologist. I think that's so true. And you're speaking to my audience, Roni. My audience is magnanimous individuals strong men who are seeking the highest levels of professional and personal excellence. So this audience wants to man up, and you're singing the music to their ears. On the flip side of the strong man, we have a phrase that I think it's probably been banned on Google. It's toxic femininity. You know
Yeah.
something about that? What does that mean? I only know about toxic masculinity, which I try to avoid at all costs. But what is toxic femininity?
Yeah. So first of all, say the conversation around toxic masculinity is problematic because we've equated toxic masculinity with traditional masculinity. Now, both men and women have their toxic behaviors. And basically what that means is, they take masculine and feminine virtues and they use them for negative means. It all depends on where we channel that. I'm also working on a toxic masculinity video, but really highlighting that it doesn't mean traditional masculinity and kind of exploring where masculine virtues can be used for evil. But toxic femininity is, and I felt like that was a more pressing conversation because there's this idea that women can do no harm. Women are always good and always innocent, and it's always kind of the patriarchy that's causing the problems. And, that's a misapprehension, within relationships, and also just within society, organizations. It's everywhere, so to speak. So the idea there was just to talk about these female characteristics and show where they become problematic. And I did that, by talking about these kind of 4 archetypes: the femme fatale, the devouring mother, mean girls, and the eternal daughter. And it was just a way to show, female sexuality can also be used for negative ends. It can be misused. It can be abused in all sorts of ways. The devouring mother is where the maternal instinct isn't healthy anymore. It is turned up all the way and doesn't let the child grow, because healthy mothering is total dependence at first and then increasing levels of independence. And you allow the child to explore the world, take risks, and that's a whole process that happens. But a mother who, projects her own neuroticism and anxiety onto the kid doesn't let them grow up. She keeps them dependent. And a lot of these kids grow up to be, either ineffectual, kind of, very dependent, very kind of like people who can't really function in the world. Other times, they swing all the other way and they disconnect. They cut off their mothers completely. And it causes a lot of issues, to say the least. And then Mean Girls was just, there's the movie, and all girls have experienced bullying of some kind. But the idea there was to give a language for it, to explain why. There's a lot of evolutionary psychology that's behind it. And it was just kind of grounding it in a little bit more research and hardcore psychology, and helping people see it, because, female antisocial behavior is a lot more subtle. Men will have a physical fight, but women, it's often kind of under the radar, under the surface. So I wanted to help people understand it and identify it. And then the eternal daughter is just, these women on Instagram that talk about like soft femininity and being in their soft era. Like, yes, there's a softness that goes with femininity, but if you completely abdicate responsibility for your life, that's not helpful. If you don't develop, your own identity, personality, ability to function in the world without, outside of your father's home, outside of your boyfriend's home, husband's home, like you have some sort of ability to take care of yourself as well. And women like that, when they become mothers, their kids also can't rely on them. And to be married to a woman like that is to feel like you're married to a child at some point. It doesn't work anymore. So that was the idea. It was just to kind of go through all of these kinds of manifestations, give a name and explanation for them. And I'm going to do the same with toxic masculinity, which is it's just a different conversation. It's the word has been out there, but it doesn't mean what we think it means. So yeah.
It's a brilliant analysis. I want to break down a little bit. What are the effects of those forms of mothering on the kids? Because that's the angle that I see it as, working with anxious kids. So what I've seen with the eternal daughter, so that's a woman without fortitude, without toughness. That has a huge effect on the family, especially on the kids. And what happens is the kids lack discipline, and so they become terrors. They have huge behavioral problems, and nobody likes them, and they don't like themselves because they can't control themselves. They can't discipline themselves because their mother has never disciplined them. And in fact, the mother has probably undermined the father's desire to discipline the child. And that's also where the father needs to man up, say, hey, we got to do what's best for the kids. So going back to the role of strong fathers.
Yeah. No, that's a great observation, because that dynamic really plays out where a mother like that, these are like the gentle parenting kind of mothers that they don't want to ever, set limits.
Exactly.
They don't have like the fortitude.
Just cave. They just cave right away.
They cave, and they want to be liked by their kids. They don't want to ever rock the boat. They're usually very agreeable. And they kind of just, like this kind of fairy tale, like we're always going to be happy. Everything's going to be good. And their kids really suffer from that, because kids really do need limits. They need the discipline. They need to learn how to regulate themselves emotionally. They need to know how to kind of, ride through the temper tantrums and get to the other side. They need to know how to act in public, without being little terrors. Because a kid who doesn't get that is going to be a pain in the ass wherever they go. And people aren't going to like it when they're around. And that's awful for a kid, because a kid who's, well-disciplined, knows how to behave himself, like he's going to get such a different reaction from the people around him. And that's also really healthy and building. So a kid that doesn't get that, I think it's really unfortunate, and it's really the mother's doing here. And the other thing of like women kind of, cutting off their husband's ability to engage in any disciplining. And the thing is, a lot of there's forms of discipline that only the father can do. Mothers and fathers can set limits, but fathers often enforce those limits just much more often. Like that's a known fact, in the literature. That's solid. And when a mother doesn't let her husband enforce those limits, the kids suffer. And a lot of times the dads just kind of, fade away into the background, because they're being, kind of blocked from any interaction, and they can't stand their kids' behavior anymore. So they just kind of take the back seat. So it's a very unhealthy dynamic, to say the least.
And what can happen with the toxic mothers then is, because they swoop in to save the child from any difficulty and do things for the child. We call that, in literature, we call that parental accommodations. The child becomes weak. His soul atrophies. He's not able to do things, and he gets anxious as a result when put in new situations, and becomes more dependent on the mother, which the mother feeds into. So it turns into a vicious cycle, as I think you implied. So that's what's called codependence.
Right, right. So the idea there is healthy development for a kid. You start, the baby needs the mother completely. And as the child grows, you want to let them kind of venture out, explore the world. There's obvious dangers in that, as they're toddlers, they're walking around, they might fall, they might hit their head. There's all sorts of things that, you can't control everything. Also, fathers at this point start playing with the kids a lot more. And they do something that's called rough and tumble play. So it's very physical. It's like wrestling, throwing them around. And fathers engage in that a lot more than mothers because of like this risk taking and anxiety that mothers will have just naturally a little bit more. Um, Mothers who don't let the fathers do that, they block their kids' development of independence. They block their kids' development like physically and socially. That rough and tumble play is really important. And the other thing you said, about the anxiety component, a woman like that has her own eroticism, her own anxiety, and
Exactly.
she
That's
projects it
exactly
onto
it.
the kid. And then the kid, absorbs that. And they have that internal dialogue themselves all of a sudden of like being really risk averse, being really anxious. They can't socialize properly because they're, the kid who can't have fun, the weird kid, the kid who keeps running to mom, whenever anything gets a little tough. And once that happens, like the trajectory of that kid, falls behind dramatically from the other kids, and they become unpopular. Like people don't want to play with them, and that just feeds into it more and more. And then the kid kind of gets even closer to mom, and the moms in this situation a lot of times they encourage that kind of behavior because their children kind of become their best friends and they like it.
Hmm.
It's
Codependence.
yeah, it's like it's comfortable for them. And a mother like that completely destroys the child's development. Um there's all like they grow up with anxiety. These kids, a lot of times they're depressed, they're lonely because they never develop those social skills. They can't emotionally regulate. Like this is the kid who will start crying. At 10 years old, like when he's playing with some kids and like falls down. That's not developmentally appropriate. Um, and yeah, and they then grow up to have a really hard time, in relationships. A lot of times they're still kind of connected to the mother in a very unhealthy way. In the teenage years, a healthy part of development is to separate yourself from your parents, get closer to your peers, and kind of a lot of times it's you try to define your values and your identity in opposition to your parents. Like whatever your parents believe and value, you kind of try to assume the other end. And, when you grow up, it usually kind of balances and a lot of the values you were instilled with at home kind of crystallize. Um, but a child who is still connected to their mother doesn't go through that process. Um, so it's really abuse, hidden behind the guise of compassion. And that was one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about it because, mother like that is like, oh, I'm so nice. I'm so compassionate. Look how much I love my kids. But you're ruining their lives. So I wanted to kind of just give the profile for that. And I got a lot of feedback, back of like, my mother was like this, or, oh my God, I'm like this. This is so
Mm,
helpful. I read this,
mm,
I showed this to my husband and he laughed because it was like,
mm.
it's so me. So like that was also nice that people were able to kind of see themselves in it and take
Yeah, it's
responsibility.
impressive.
Yeah. So there you have it.
Well, the devouring mother strategy would work okay if the mom could carry around her son in a fanny pack like a marsupial for the rest of his life. But unfortunately, the transhumanists haven't been able to pull that one off yet. But, hopefully we'll have some developments there that'll allow for that. So, well, what my audience likes is people who speak the truth, even when it's unpopular, defending traditional values as you're doing, which is why I'm really enjoying this conversation. Thank you for this. Very, very articulate. What is your mission? What inspires you to say these things?
Yeah. So, one of the reasons I wanted to do this is kind of bring back, like a common sense approach, like a traditional, healthy approach that's not, overly conservative. It's kind of a pushback against this like very woke agenda. And to talk sense in all sorts of areas, like I hear a lot of negative messaging around relationships. People talking to the extremes because, it's good for engagement, but it's unhealthy for people to consume that content. And I really wanted to just like bring actual research back psychology, but like in a fun, dynamic way. That's not, like stale and stuffy. But just to have like a very healthy message, a hopeful message. And, I'm politically incorrect. So sometimes that hopeful message is, it takes a little bit of brutal honesty to get there. So, I have an easy time, being authentic and saying what I think. So I felt like if anyone was going to do it, I can do it. And I just wanted to bring, truth in all sorts of areas. I made one video about the history of woke. So it's like giving people a real run through of what it means. It's not innocent like we think it is. And once people have the history, like I hoped it would give them a little bit more like legitimization of, opposing this and owning, their Western values. Same thing with the transgender video I did. Like a lot of these kids are being really abused, and it's sadistic, and it has nothing to do with compassion. So it's just really like bringing common sense to a lot of these things, especially like around relationships. Being antagonistic towards men, towards women isn't helpful. I hear a lot of men just complaining about women and like the conversation stops there. But there are good women. I always tell people, hate feminism, not women. Like women aren't the problem. A lot of the feminist rhetoric is the problem. So yeah, so hopefully it helps, shed some light on these things. And also just wanted to, I see a lot of YouTube videos of just people kind of, spilling their opinions all over. And I wanted to bring people, in my videos, I like quote people and I show like the quotes and like what book I got this from, like what thinker. I wanted to like draw people into the text. Like I wanted them to see this isn't just like me making shit up. Like this is backed by thinkers who are greater than I am, and like making them feel like they're on that journey of like exploring these ideas with me. So yeah.
The message to get to more people. How can we help you 10x your impact?
Great question. I think it's whatever video kind of resonated. Share it with others. I would love to also hear, what people are interested in. I'm constantly, working on new videos, but it's always helpful to know what people are kind of, what they're in need of, what their big questions are. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks. Thanks for what you do. Thanks for speaking the truth. Keep doing it. And for the audience here, leave a comment if you like this. Send Roni some comments, feedback on what other topics would be good for her. Share it with your people. You're coming out with a book, I believe. Is that right?
I am. I'm working on it. A book on relationships. So very, very holistic. Like I go into all, psychology, evolutionary psychology, biology, I give examples from mythology and all sorts of like kind of different disciplines and tie it together. And I talk about why monogamy is good. Men and women are different. What healthy relationship looks like. Talking about conflicts and all sorts of these different things, and just to give people a little bit more of a roadmap. Yeah, relationships are different in the 21st century, but there's hope. So if we have a little bit of a roadmap or guardrails, hopefully we can make our relationships healthier and help people who are looking find a relationship.
Virtuous leaders listening to this, you can ask yourself, what does strong manhood, strong womanhood look like in my life? And who can I share this message with? Roni, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.